I came home from work one Thursday afternoon to find a crew of landscapers digging up my front yard. At first, I thought they had the wrong address. My yard was pristine, freshly mowed, flower beds blooming, and a little white picket fence I'd painted myself. But there they were, shovels in hand, carving up my grass like it belonged to them. I parked my car in a hurry and ran up to the foreman. "Excuse me, what are you doing to my yard?" He looked at his clipboard, then back at me, expressionless. "Per HOA request. Installing decorative koi pond. Part of the new beautification plan." I blinked. "I didn't approve that." He shrugged. "It's already approved by the HOA board. All front yards on Birch Lane are being upgraded." "What?" "No letter. No email. No vote. Just fish?" That night, I tore through my documents. Nothing in the HOA bylaws said they could alter personal property without consent. But then I found an amendment quietly added last month that gave them limited landscape authority over communal facing frontage. The vague language was signed off by 3 board members. One of them was, surprise, Karen Simmons, president of the HOA and my next-door neighbor, also known for hating my Halloween decorations, my solar lights, and, apparently, my geraniums. The next morning, the pond was already half dug. My grass was gone. A plastic liner had been stretched across the pit. A pump system was being installed. And I stood there, mouth open, watching my home being turned into a fishbowl. I tried confronting Karen. She stood on her porch, arms crossed, her signature tight smile on full display. "You should be grateful," she said. "A koi pond raises property values. Besides, the community voted. Well, most of them. It passed." "No one asked me," I snapped. She tilted her head. "Well, not everyone needs to be consulted. Majority rules." "Majority rules?" "That's what tyrants say." That night, I didn't sleep. I sat on my front steps, staring at the hole where my garden used to be, while the sound of the water pump hummed like a cruel lullaby. I wasn't just angry, I was violated. I realized something else, too. I wasn't the only one. Across the street, the Martins' front lawn was being prepped for another beautification. They looked just as stunned as I was. I knocked on their door. Then I went to the Hernandezes. And the Patels. One by one, I discovered the truth. None of US had agreed to this. And if Karen and the HOA thought I'd just roll over and let them drown my yard in fish, they were about to learn who they were messing with. By Sunday afternoon, there were 6 of us. 6 households on Birch Lane, all with destroyed front yards and koi ponds in various stages of construction. And not one of us had approved it. We gathered in my living room, surrounded by mugs of strong coffee and stronger opinions. Mr. Hernandez was furious. "They tore up my sprinkler system," he shouted. "Do you know how much that's going to cost me to fix?" Mrs. Patel nodded solemnly. "They said it was voted on, but I never saw a ballot." That's when I decided to dig deeper. On Monday, I went down to the HOA office, a rented room above a dentist's clinic that smelled like bleach and stale coffee. I demanded to see the meeting minutes from the past 2 months. The receptionist, a high schooler with chipped nail polish and the enthusiasm of a dead fish, lazily handed me a file folder and said, "Knock yourself out." And knock myself out, I did. Buried in the minutes from last month was a line item titled Landscape Enhancement Pilot Program. It mentioned an informal vote held during a special board session attended only by Karen Simmons and 2 other board members, Doug and Beverly, who also happened to live on the only 2 houses not being touched by the project. Even more suspicious, there was no public notice, no community email, and the so-called pilot program had already been fully funded by reallocating maintenance budget without full member approval. They were using a loophole, twisting the HOA bylaws in ways they were never meant to be used. I returned home and made copies of everything. My printer groaned as page after page spat out the evidence, the secret vote, the manipulated language, the misused budget. I stapled them into packets and passed them out to my new allies. We needed a plan, and fast. That night, I stood on my porch and stared at my yard again. The pond was finished now. Lily pads floated peacefully on the surface, and a small wooden sign read, Community Koi Pond, a Birch Lane enhancement. Enhancement? It felt more like a violation. A power move. Karen wasn't just running the HOA. She was using it like her personal chessboard, moving pieces without our consent. I opened my laptop and started typing an email to a local investigative reporter. If the HOA wanted to play dirty, I was going to get a whole lot louder. Because this wasn't just about koi fish anymore. This was about power. And I was ready for war. By Tuesday, the koi pond wasn't the only thing making waves. The email I sent to the local paper had landed in the inbox of a reporter named Mia Tran, known for her HOA exposés. She called me that morning. Her first words? I've heard of HOA nightmares, but this? This is next level. She agreed to meet me that afternoon, and when I showed her the documents, her eyes lit up like a detective on the verge of solving a cold case. Unauthorized fund reallocations, lack of public notice, closed-door votes. This is textbook abuse of power, she said, already taking notes. Meanwhile, word was spreading. My neighbors started forwarding HOA emails to me, and I began noticing a pattern. The board was selectively enforcing rules, harassing certain households while turning a blind eye to others. Karen's house, for instance, had a massive flagpole that clearly violated height restrictions. Doug had an illegal shed, and Beverly's yard looked like a jungle. No violations. No fines. No koi ponds. Coincidence? I didn't think so. On Wednesday, we held our own meeting, no HOA approval needed. 15 families showed up, all furious, all feeling betrayed. Mrs. Grant from down the block brought cookies. The Patels brought a projector. And I brought the packets of evidence. The vibe? Angry but organized. We voted our vote and decided to petition for a recall of the current board. According to the HOA bylaws, if we gathered signatures from 60% of homeowners, we could force a re-election. Karen must have caught wind of our plan, because the very next day, I received a violation notice in my mailbox. Reason: unapproved signage displayed on property. Penalty: $200 fine. The sign? A tiny recall Karen flyer taped to my living room window. I laughed. She was predictable. Intimidation was her go-to weapon. But it wasn't working anymore. Because here's the thing about people like Karen, they build their kingdoms on silence, apathy, and fear. But once the silence breaks? Once the neighbors start talking, start questioning, that kingdom starts to crack. The koi pond in my yard, once a symbol of powerlessness, was becoming a rallying cry. It was no longer just about fish. It was about taking back our street. And Karen? She was about to learn what happens when the people she thought were pawns start playing their own game. By the end of the week, we had collected over 70% of homeowners' signatures. It was more than enough. The recall petition was official, filed, and timestamped. Karen Simmons and her 2 cronies were now on borrowed time. The vote would take place in 2 weeks. We celebrated like it was the 4th of July, minus the fireworks, just pizza, lemonade, and that buzzing feeling of people realizing they weren't powerless anymore. But Karen? She didn't go down without a fight. The very next day, her retaliation was swift and brutal. 10 of us received new violation letters in the mail. Suddenly, our mailboxes were non-regulation, our grass was overgrown by HOA standards, and my favorite, someone was hosting unpermitted neighborhood gatherings. Yeah. Our pizza night. I knew she was scared. But this? This was panic. Desperation dressed up as enforcement. Still, some neighbors started to waver. Mrs. Patel, who had been one of our loudest voices, was suddenly quiet. Mr. Hernandez stopped answering group texts. The fear was creeping back in. So I decided to raise the stakes. With Mia's help, I leaked the HOA documents, budget reallocations, private meeting notes, and violation patterns to the local news. Within 24 hours, the story was online. Suburban HOA accused of abusing power to force unwanted pond project. It went viral. Comments flooded in. This is straight up theft. My HOA pulled something similar, go get M. Koi pond? I'd have stocked it with piranhas. By Sunday, camera crews were driving down Birch Lane. Reporters knocked on doors. The HOA board went radio silent. Karen stopped waving from her porch. Beverly took down her gnome collection. Doug put up a no trespassing sign. But the best part? That night, someone dumped a dozen rubber koi fish in my pond with a cardboard sign. Free the yard. The tide had turned. The street that once feared Karen's clipboard was now laughing in the face of her rules. Kids rode scooters through HOA-approved flower beds. Neighbors waved at each other with the kind of camaraderie born in battle. I stood on my porch, watching the street buzz with life and defiance. And I knew, win or lose the vote, we had already taken something back. Our voices. Our power. Our community. But the war wasn't over. Not yet. The day of the recall vote felt like Judgment Day. Neighbors trickled into the community center, ballots in hand, eyes narrowed with purpose. Karen sat at the registration table like nothing was wrong, her lips tight and painted in her trademark cherry red. She avoided eye contact. So did Doug and Beverly. But the rest of us? We were done being polite. By 5 p.m., the votes were counted. The results were posted on the bulletin board like some kind of suburban revolution scoreboard. Karen Simmons, recalled. Doug, recalled. Beverly, recalled. The room erupted. People hugged. Mrs. Grant actually cried. Mr. Hernandez shouted, "And no more fish," and everyone laughed. Even the Patels, who had stayed silent the past few weeks, broke out into applause. Karen didn't say a word. She just grabbed her purse, stood up, and walked out without looking back. I followed her out, not to gloat, but because I had one thing left to say. She turned at the edge of the parking lot. "You think you've won?" She hissed. "No," I replied. "I know we did. And next time you want a koi pond, try your own yard." She didn't answer. Just got into her Lexus and drove off like a villain in a soap opera finale. But here's where it gets even better. Within a week, the new interim board ordered an immediate halt to the koi pond project. They brought in landscapers to restore the front yards. And my yard? It finally looked like mine again, no lily pads, no signage, no HOA-sponsored fish flopping in the sun. Then came the real twist. Mia, the reporter, followed up with a deeper investigation. Turns out, Karen had been quietly using HOA funds for more than just koi ponds, like paying a cousin's landscaping business triple market rates and reimbursing herself for office supplies that included a $600 espresso machine. She was done. And not just in the HOA sense, she was being investigated for fraud. Now, when I sit on my front steps, I breathe a little easier. The grass has grown back, the flowers are blooming again, and a little handmade sign sits proudly in the dirt. This yard belongs to me. No more HOA tyranny. No more fishy business. And Karen? She might have built a koi pond on my front yard, but I buried her little empire right under it.